So I'd like to welcome you to the second part of preserving meats. And during this session, we are going to talk about drying meat. And so again, my name is Shelley Barnes. I'm an extension agent in Family Consumer Sciences in Wilson County. And so this is our Extension Explorers session on drying meat. I'm really excited about this session because, like I said in the last presentation, we're right in the throes of hunting season for some hunters. And so I have gotten some questions from my neighbors about, what can they do with all this meat that they're getting? And this is definitely something that we can do that will last for a long time and is a tasty, savory treat for your family. So in this session, we will learn about the drying, how the drying process preserves food, and how to prepare meat for jerky, and how to dry meat safely. Jerky is a lightweight dried meat product that is a handy food for backpackers, campers, and outdoor sports enthusiasts, and just anybody, really. My kids love jerky. My husband loves jerky. I love jerky. And so it's a pretty healthy food. And we can make it even healthier if we do it ourselves. It requires no refrigeration. Jerky can be made from almost any lean meat, including beef, pork, venison, or smoked turkey breast. Raw poultry is not recommended for use in making jerky because of the texture and the flavor of the finished product. So probably want to steer clear of that. So let's get into how the drying preserves the food. Most foods have enough water that support activity of enzymes, chemical reactions, and the growth of microorganisms during production, processing, and storage. Drying involves the removal and bonding of moisture so that it's not available to enzymes and microorganisms. This reduces spoilage and growth of bacteria that make us sick. So that's a good thing. Successful drying depends on heat, dry air, and good air circulation. Control of temperature, humidity, and air circulation are critical because they affect relative humidity and drying time, as well as rate of drying. If the rate of drying is too slow, so like the temperature is too slow, the humidity is too high, lots of other things or factors, then microorganisms could grow during the drying process. By contrast, a fast rate of drying that causes rapid evaporation of moisture from the surface of the food, so not diffusion of moisture from the inside, that can result in case hardening. Case hardening refers to development of a hard shell that forms around the surface of the food, and that would trap the moisture in the center of the food, which can allow spoilage to occur. So basically, it would spoil from the inside out. We don't want that to happen either. So it is important when drying meat to do so safely by preparing it properly before drying. So we're going to talk about that next. Always, in every type of food preservation, always start with good quality product. So with meat, we want to start with good quality lean meat like beef, pork, venison, or smoked turkey breast. Keep meat and poultry refrigerated at 40 degrees Fahrenheit or below. Use ground beef and poultry within 2 days, red meats within 3 to 5 days, or freeze for later use. Raw meats can be contaminated with microorganisms that cause disease. These harmful bacteria can easily multiply on moist, high-protein foods like meat and poultry, and can cause illness if the products are not handled correctly. Follow these recommendations for safe handling of meat and poultry. Always wash your hands thoroughly with soap and running water for at least 20 seconds before and after handling raw meats. And you can always sing the birthday song a couple of times if you don't know the 20 seconds and if you don't want to count. So making sure that you wash them thoroughly in between your fingers, around your wrist, scratching the inside of your hands, washing the back of your hands, making sure every part is thoroughly clean. Also, we want you to include cleaning equipment and utensils. Also, keep meat and poultry refrigerated at 40 degrees Fahrenheit or below. Use ground beef and poultry within that 2 days, red meats within 3 to 5 days, or freeze for later use. Next, we want you to thaw your frozen meat in the refrigerator, not on the kitchen counter. And lastly, marinate meat in the refrigerator. Do not save the marinade and do not reuse the marinade. That's how we handle meat safely. If wild game is used to make jerky, the meat should be treated to kill the trichinella parasite before it is sliced and marinated. This parasite causes the disease trichinosis. To treat the meat, freeze a portion that is 6 inches or less thick at 0 degrees Fahrenheit or below for at least 30 days. Freezing will not eliminate bacteria from the meat. It's important to know that. It is important to remember that the wound location and skill of the hunter can affect the safety of the meat. If the animal is wounded in such a way that the contents of its gut comes in contact with the meat or the hunter's hands while dressing the meat, fecal bacteria can contaminate the meat. It is best to avoid making jerky from this meat and use it only in ways that it will be thoroughly cooked. Deer carcasses should be rapidly chilled to avoid bacterial growth. So to prepare strips, partially freeze meat to make slicing easier. The thickness of the meat strips will make a difference in your drying time. So sliced meat no thicker than 1/4 inch. Trim and discard all the fat from meat because it becomes rancid quickly. If a chewy jerky is desired, slice with the grain. Slice across the grain if a more tender, brittle jerky is preferred. A tenderizer can be used according to package directions if desired. The meat can be marinated for flavor and tenderness as well. Marinade recipes may include oil, salt, spices, and acid ingredients such as vinegar, lemon juice, teriyaki, or soy sauce or wine. This is an example of a jerky marinade you can make for jerky. You can add your own seasonings to make it as spicy as you like, or create your own marinade. So we have that example on the screen. 1.5 to 2 pounds of lean meat. You can use beef, pork, or venison. 1/4 cup of soy sauce, 1 tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce, 1/4 teaspoon each of black pepper and garlic powder, 1/2 teaspoon of onion powder, and 1 teaspoon of hickory smoke flavored salt. Oh, I'm so hungry already. Doesn't that sound delicious? Place the strips of meat in a shallow pan and cover with the marinade. Cover and refrigerate 1 to 2 hours overnight. If you plan to heat the meat before drying to reduce the risk of foodborne illness, do this at the end of the marinating. Heating the meat to 160 degrees Fahrenheit helps to ensure that any bacteria present will be destroyed by wet or moist heat. Illnesses caused by Salmonella and E. coli O157H7 in homemade jerky have raised questions about the safety of traditional drying methods for making beef and venison jerky. If improperly cooked, homemade jerky may contain bacteria that can result in severe, life-threatening illness and possible death. Heating in a marinade will also reduce the time needed to dry meat. To heat, bring strips and marinade to a boil and boil for 5 minutes before draining and drying. If strips are more than 1/4 inch thick, the length of time may need to be increased. If you can, check the temperature of several strips with a metal stem style thermometer to determine that 160 degrees Fahrenheit has been reached. Remove meat strips from the marinade and drain on clean, absorbent towels. So this is real important to do this step. I don't know if you noticed what I had said in the beginning. Heating that meat to 160 degrees Fahrenheit helps to ensure that any bacteria present will be destroyed. So this is a must to do when you're preparing your jerky. If you don't boil the meat before drying, you can do this. You should bake it first before drying, or it can be baked after drying. So this is an alternative. If you bake before drying, place the jerky on cake racks placed on baking sheets and bake in the oven at 325 degrees Fahrenheit. Check the internal temperature using a meat thermometer to make sure the meat has reached 160 degrees Fahrenheit, and poultry should have reached 165 degrees. Then either dry in the oven or in a dehydrator. If you bake after drying, heat at 275 degrees Fahrenheit for 10 minutes. Thicker strips may require longer heating to reach 160 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, jerky can be made from ground beef too, ground meat, using special presses to form or shape the product. Disease-causing microorganisms are more difficult to eliminate in ground meat, though, than in whole meat strips. If ground meat is used, follow the general tips for safe handling of meat and poultry. Since you cannot heat the ground meat in a marinade before drying, you would need to follow the dehydrator manufacturer's directions when heating the product at the end of the drying time. Again, an internal temperature of 160 degrees Fahrenheit is necessary to eliminate disease-causing bacteria, such as E. coli if present. Now, once we have prepared our meat, the next step is to dry the meat. To do this, there are different ways to dry the meat. It is unsafe to dry meat outdoors because it will not dry quickly enough to prevent the growth of bacteria. The only foods that are safe to dry outdoors are foods like fruits because of their high acid content, and also beans and peas dried on the vine. Meat will dry safely indoors in your oven or in a dehydrator. When drying in the oven, preheat your oven to 140 degrees Fahrenheit. Arrange the strips on cake racks placed on baking sheets. Place the slices close together, but not touching and not overlapping. Dry until a test piece cracks, but does not break when it is bent. Usually this is 10 to 24 hours for samples not heated in a marinade. Samples heated in marinades will dry faster. Begin checking samples after 3 hours. Once drying is completed, pat off any beads of oil with clean, absorbent towels. Remove from racks and cool. You also can wrap jerky in a paper towel for several hours to absorb the grease. Using a fan to circulate air in your oven will speed up the drying process if you're using an oven. Open the door a few inches and place the fan nearby. In this case, you may want to set your oven at 170 degrees Fahrenheit to ensure that there's enough heat for drying. Now, a dehydrator is a self-contained unit with a heat source and ventilation system used to dry foods indoors. They can be purchased, made at home, and vary in price and efficiency. Any food that is safe to dry that retains its high quality can be dried in a dehydrator. What would be some advantages of using your dehydrator to dry foods, you ask? Well, a good quality product can be in or near our kitchen, does not tie up other kitchen equipment, and doesn't depend on the weather, sanitary, minimal time to dry. It also is not going to heat up our house like using the oven would. But there are some disadvantages as well. Dehydrators can be expensive. The quantity of food that is dried really depends on the size of your dehydrator and number of trays. You can see that there are two basic designs for dehydrators. On the top, we have a vertical airflow dehydrator, and the bottom photo in the slide is a horizontal airflow dehydrator. These really are just personal choice on which one you want. But the one who has the horizontal airflow is really a great model to use because the heating element and fan is at the back of the unit or the side of the unit. The major advantages of horizontal flow are that it reduces flavor mixture. So several different foods can be dried at one time, and all trays receive equal heat penetration, as well as juices and liquids do not drip down into the heating element. Now, vertical airflow dehydrators are great to have as well. They have the heating element in the fan located at the base. So there underneath the trays. If different foods are dried, flavors can mix though, and so that can be an undesirable product at the end. And liquids can drip into the heating element, which could cause issue. Most dehydrators do not include instructions for heating the meat to 160 degrees Fahrenheit. This is still very important to do when using dehydrators though. After simmering or baking the meat to 160 degrees Fahrenheit, place the strips in a single layer on drying racks. Avoid overlapping or touching pieces. Dry the strips at 140 degrees Fahrenheit in a dehydrator. Maintain a constant dehydrator temperature of 140 degrees Fahrenheit during the process. This is important because the process must be fast enough to dry food before it spoils, and it must remove enough water to prevent microorganisms from growing. Remember, we want to prevent that case hardening issue. Now, let's talk about poultry jerky. The texture of raw poultry makes it more difficult to dry, but it can be done. It is best to use breast meat and cook it in the oven first. Cut the breast meat into thin strips, 1/4 of an inch thick and 1 inch wide. Cure the strips for 24 hours in a brine solution and hold at 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Rinse and soak the strips in cold water for 30 minutes. Drain and arrange 1 layer thick on a nonstick cookie sheet. Place the meat in an oven at 325 degrees Fahrenheit for 1 hour. Using a meat thermometer, make sure the meat has reached an internal temperature of 160 degrees Fahrenheit. Reduce the oven temperature and heat until the meat exhibits the desired dryness. Use any jerky within 1 week. Otherwise, it needs to be frozen so that you can prevent rancidity. So let's talk about storing jerky. Cool food first to remove as much moisture as possible to prevent growth of mold. Package in glass jars or heavy plastic food storage bags so that the meat will not absorb any moisture. Remember, we've already taken the moisture out. We don't want any more moisture to get in there. You want to store this in a cool, dry place. Properly dried jerky will keep at room temperature 2 weeks in a sealed container. For best results, though, to increase the shelf life and maintain best flavor and quality, refrigerate or freeze jerky. So that's it. That's it for our dried meat presentation. We have our Extension Explorers website again here. It will be listed in the chat and it will be at the bottom of our video. Don't forget to like us and subscribe to our channel, and we'll see you next time on Extension Explorers.